Canada became, from my point of view here in the UK, Canada became like a living dystopia. With the crackdown on the truckers' protests, Justin Trudeau became cartoonishly frightening.
And he's doubling down now, even though he's in the last throes of his fiefdom, he's doubling down.
He was saying that it's correct to use fear to make people compliant if they're not correctly calibrated. And I find that sort of concept very jarring because we don't normally talk about human brains as requiring calibration. That's something that would be reserved for little bits of machinery. We don't calibrate people, not if we think of them as people, perhaps only if we think of them as miscreant social units to be shuffled around a board.
Welcome to my podcast. This is Laura Dodsworth, and we met in Oxford at James Orr's house after a lecture. It was a party, we met not for very long, but we had a very short, interesting conversation, and I read your book and learned quite a bit from your book. I have some notes here. Let me look up my notes. Maybe you could start by just telling my audience who you are and what's going on. What's going on?
Oh, wow, that feels very existential. Who am I and what's going on? My name is Laura, 51. I have 2 children. This is kind of the basic information. I think I have quite a creatively checkered past. In some ways, for people, my books don't really add up. My most recent book was called Free Your Mind, The New World of Manipulation and How to Resist It. And that was very much a follow-on from the book before, which was called A State of Fear, How the UK Government Weaponised Fear During the COVID-19 Pandemic. And that for me was a response to what was nothing less than a huge existential shock of lockdowns and all the rest of it being inflicted on the world from March 2020. The mass evocation of fear and compliance, which shocked me. Before that, I was just bumbling along, doing other things that were, I suppose, also quite taboo, but completely different. I had 3 books about the body. I photographed and interviewed 100 women about their breasts, and then 100 men about their manhood and their manhood, and then 100 women about their vulvas. And that was a documentary called 100 Vaginas. So I do see a trajectory in this path, which goes from breasts to brains. I get kind of intellectually slut-shamed for it, actually. Like, oh, she photographed fannies. What's she got to say about anything that's worthwhile? That whore photographer. I think I've literally been called that. But my interest has been in the taboo, really what makes us who we are. I mean, who would think that something like our sexed experience of the world would be taboo? But in today's upside-down transgender ideology world, it is. And at a time when we were all supposed to be really towing the line, and here in the UK, clapping outside on our doorsteps every Thursday for the NHS, like North Korean SEALs, to say, well, hang on a minute, what is this excessive use of fear that's being weaponized against us? That was also taboo. And yeah, that led me to the latest book, because I think that in a world that feels very out of control, it feels like society's plane in free fall. We're nosediving. There's a feeling of a net tightening, institutions captured by woke ideology, a complete contortion of truth and tenets that we held as absolutely fact and as dear just a decade or 2 ago. People think, where is this going? Well, when that plane is in free fall, you have to put your oxygen mask on first yourself. And I keep coming back to, what do we do? What do we do in this time? How do we make peace with what we've learned about people and the fact that the government and ethics bodies are not white knights? They're not going to save us. Well, what you do first is you make sure you're sovereign of your own mind, that you know how to recognize and deflect manipulation. So that's where I ended up with Free Your Mind, my latest book.
Yes. Very timely book. People's lives. I remember 2020, March. I went to, my son was playing at a bar on right around my birthday. Oh, I think it was St. Patrick's Day. And he showed up, but his band didn't. They were all afraid to come to the bar. And so there was just a smattering of people who still wanted life to go on. And everybody kind of got on stage with each other to try to make the music happen. But it was very eerie because there was nobody on the roads. There was nobody in the bar. Well, there were a few people in the bar, but all kind of feeling like, otherworldly. You felt like you're in a sci-fi movie all of a sudden, didn't you? Because it just was not whatever you expected was gone. It was gone and gone, and it's still gone, and it's still gone, right?
Well, we were in an experiment. It was an experiment. We were never supposed to lock down. It wasn't in pandemic preparedness plans. It was contraindicated by the World Health Organization and UK official government pandemic literature. It was an experiment. We copied China, for God's sake. We were experimented on. The idea that you could shut off all of civic, economic and human function, basically, that you could stop people being present at the birth of their babies, weddings, funerals, take children out of school, which, my family, we're going to feel the consequences of that forever, that you could do all that and be okay. It was an experiment. It was completely unethical. But there is something you say about your son's story of playing on a stage and no one's turning up that I like. And that is the idea of the wisdom of crowds. If you hear that there's a dangerous virus and a pandemic, what do? Well, you modify your own behavior. You don't need governments to tell you. It's nonsense. I actually don't think that the governments of any country really needed to do very much at all to control and modify human behavior because people already knew how to calculate risk for themselves. I remember in the early days, I changed my behavior a little bit. My mother certainly did. She's got terminal lung conditions. She started shielding, as they called it, really early. So people know how to do this. We know from Google mobility data that people travelled less once they knew about the virus. But then I think it would have been self-regulating.
What's travel glass? I don't know what that term
Google mobility data, they just travelled less. So we know from tech information, they travelled less. They just stayed at home more. They didn't travel as far. It took me a few weeks into the first lockdown to realise I couldn't actually legally be kept indoors. There were all kinds of clauses in the laws if you looked at them. And one was that if you can't work from home, you are allowed to leave the home to work.
Right.
Because otherwise it would be completely mad, wouldn't it? They'd be telling you can't work and earn money and eat. And as a photographer and writer, I had a project I wanted to do outside the house. I just kept reading it over and over thinking, oh no, I am allowed to go out. This is fine. And then driving around the motorway and through London to go to a shoot with somebody who'd agreed to see me. And it was completely empty. It was like being in zombie world. There are people who they enjoyed the empty streets, but I hated it. Mm-hmm. All of my nerves were kind of prickling on edge, and it felt dangerous, not the virus, but the fact that people had been persuaded to empty the world in this way.
Well, when I walked, I always walk. I like to walk. So when I have anything I have to do, if I can walk, I walk. And it was very interesting to walk because you'd walk and someone would be coming and they would leave the sidewalk and walk around and then come back on the sidewalk. So nobody came within really more like 20 feet of each other. So there was no passing there. And it's funny because years ago when my daughter was ill and so I got all, consumed by that and became somewhat depressed, I think, because of it, because I couldn't see a way forward for her. But my dad came to visit once, and my dad's a very funny guy. And so it reminded me how cheery my household was when I was growing up. And I went up in the bathroom and looked at myself, and there was no smile on my face. And I thought, I that's not me, and that's not my life. I'm going to start smiling. So I'd go outside and walk down the sidewalk, and I'd smile at people. And sometimes they'd look at me like, what do you want? But other people would smile back like, yes, right. That's a good. And during COVID, there was none of that because you were walking 20 feet around each other. So there was no interaction, none of those friendly neighborhood interactions were gone. Wow.
Well, it's
Wow.
even worse. It's even worse than that. I mean, it wasn't just that we stopped smiling, and I think the smile has still gone. I don't know when it will come back. I think we're broken for at least a generation, but we were encouraged, certainly here in the UK, to snitch on each other. You know, there were
Yes,
hundreds of
we had
thousands of
that too.
reports to the police. Oh, my neighbour hugged a neighbour. Oh, the old lady down the end of the road had tea with a neighbour over the fence. I
Yeah.
mean, are you
Yeah.
crazy people? There were reports about this kind of thing. My boyfriend at the time was told off by the police for sitting on a bench during a walk. You know, people they just went nuts. And so
Oh,
it's
right.
worse
Yeah.
than not smiling. We were encouraged by politicians and the police to report each other. It was easy to see how Eastern Communist bloc policing takes hold. I think it just takes a matter of weeks for something like that to happen. I remember really bitterly ruminating on this and thinking, oh, maybe Mao just gave the people what he wanted, because, you know, we turn on a dime, liberty and democracy and normal social conventions are so much more fragile than I thought. For me, it was an incredibly shocking period of time, because I thought things I'd taken for granted were just illusory. They were just illusory. I had the same thing with walking, and I think it was one of those really profound shocks. It sounds so parochial, but it means a lot. I go walking with a dog and I go jogging in countryside. And there's a real dog walkers code. You know, people say hello to each other, they chat about their dogs, and then suddenly people are on the opposite sides of a lane. And I remember people kind of getting really close to a hedge and burying their face in the hedge so they wouldn't breathe your air, you know, outside. And I don't think the smiles and the normal interaction have fully come back. And I just don't feel like they ever will. I'm sure they will, because human nature is very plastic. But I think it's going to take quite a lot more time. I think we're in a grip, we're in a series of grips of manias, really, a kind of psychic epidemic that just hasn't burnt out. That's the first time I noticed it. I think it started before. I think it really started with smartphones and social media, actually. But that's when I had my epiphany. It's COVID when I noticed it, and it's just got worse. I mean, who can forget when we were in the middle of the pandemic and lockdown, and then we had Black Lives Matters and we have protests here in this country, and the police don't really go around shooting black people in this country. You know, it's not really a thing. Maybe a couple of times. And to see somebody on their knees with a mask on their face, which would do nothing to stop a virus, screaming, "I can't breathe," was just the maddest, most hysterical thing I've ever seen. It felt like being in an alternative universe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still really I think it's still really largely an unknown exactly what came, even though we know quite a bit about what happened. The whole underpinning of it, the force of it and everything, I think is hard to understand. But, you know, you did a lot of work on describing what we should do, because these things are going to happen again. They're continually happening, actually. And so what do we do about that? Because we can't bring things to a good place by ignoring it, or, you know, imagine thinking it doesn't exist, or there's nothing we can do. Those aren't helpful. So you wrote a book, Free Your Mind.
Well, you are right. It will repeat forever, because it's the story of human nature. I mean, manipulation is as integral to human beings as persuasion and language. It's how we're built. Manipulation is nothing new. Governments have always used propaganda. Companies always want you to buy brand A over brand B. Social media platforms now, they're designed to be addictive and sticky. You know, it's the world we live in. But, you know, just in living memory, we've got world wars and the Cold War, and Jung wrote that nobody is immune from these psychic epidemics. You know, if you think that you are, you can be untainted by the sort of unshakable evil that can grip society, you're as vulnerable as anyone else. Nobody's immune from manipulation. But I do think that we're in quite...
that you're kept, when you say you're not immune, there are things you can do so that you are, at least you have a defense. Let's talk about a couple of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first is forewarned. Forewarned is forearmed. I mean, this is how the book opens, the idea that your brain is a battlefield. First of all, you have to realise that you are bombarded with unprecedented amounts of information. One somewhat contested statistic is that we get the equivalent of 174 newspapers worth of information every day. Now, that's an impossible amount of information. Our brains are just not that big, which means your brain is going to rely on its shortcuts, such as, the biases we're all subject to: conformity bias, scarcity bias, authority bias. And you're going to make decisions using these biases, which have served us very well in evolutionary terms, but they can be dangerous when they're used against you for other people's purposes. So first of all, forewarned is forearmed. And that, I think, unfortunately, that relates to governments too. It's just naive to think that governments always act in your best interests. Psychology itself used to be about diagnosing and fixing people, but now I think it's at least as much about predicting and manipulating people. So let's combine those two things, psychology and governments. The first nudge unit, which I think here in the UK in 2010, and now there are 300 nudge units, behavioural science units, that are either embedded in government or work with governments around the world. That's 300 of them in a decade and a half. And what they're doing is seeking to covertly, below the level of consciousness, manipulate people into being good little citizens. So in order to further policy goals, you're manipulated in ways you're not even aware of. We don't have any kind of democratic mandate for this with government. So government's part of it too. So understand it. Know that your brain is the territory, you're the target, and people want a piece of your brain. They want to reach their fingers in and influence you. Once you understand that, there's a very simple thing, which is, if you don't want to be fooled by the magic trick, don't go to the show. For this book, we interviewed a variety of people, from monks to magicians, political scientists to priests to politicians. And it was fascinating talking to the magician about how they do their tricks. But the very simple thing is, just don't look, don't watch. That could be when you're watching TV, you turn the ads off. It could be you spend less time on social media, which is a maelstrom of manipulation and emotion. It could be you don't watch the political briefings. Whatever it is, just don't watch. And then there's various techniques. So we set up different psychological principles, but one thing you can do is learn techniques of nudging and propaganda. A particular favourite of mine, I'll give you one example, is trigger stacking, because once you see this, you're going to start seeing it in the news more and more. And this is when emotions like fears are layered on top of each other. One recent example was a story that went viral in 2022 about COVID-19 being caused in snake venom in water. So, obviously not true. It's a random story, but it trapped into different fears. The fear of infection, a snake, and the kind of very ancient fear of a poisoner defiling the well. So you see how different things are layered on top of each other, which creates a lot more fear. That sort of fear then destabilizes your rational mind. So that's one example. You'll see that all the time in the news. Another one I saw was, because of climate change, more parasites would move up through Europe to Northern Europe, carrying diseases we don't even know about yet. It's something that hasn't happened, but there's 3 different fears roiled into one. Understanding different biases, like the conformity bias. We're herd animals, and that's a good thing. We don't eat the poison berries on the bush for good reason, because we've observed other people don't. If we saw a big crowd of people running down the street in a blind panic, we may be tempted to leave our house and run after them. Perhaps we're evading a big saber-toothed tiger. The problem is that because psychology is increasingly sophisticated and companies are using it, people use those biases against you. And the more information you're subjected to, the more you are vulnerable to those biases. So understanding what the different psychological shortcuts are that people play into and the techniques they use, that can be useful in everyday life. Like, say, if you're online shopping, I could be on Instagram and I see a celebrity I like wearing a dress. So that's the messenger effect. we're more likely to believe people that we look up to and like. And then I click on the link for the ad for the dress she's wearing, and it takes me through to an online shopping page, and it says 117 people looking at this dress. And I think, gosh, this is a really popular dress. Perhaps this is a dress I want. So that's the conformity bias. But it says, hurry, only 3 left. And there's the scarcity bias. I'm now panicking that this dress that the celebrity wears, that so many people are looking at, has nearly sold out. So I buy it. And then there might be other techniques that are used, like drip pricing. Oh, you like the dress? That's good, but the belt's not included. Do you want the belt? That's extra money. Oh, and then the shipping. We didn't tell you about that. And so just understanding how all these different techniques work can help you resist, whether it's a nationwide vaccine mandate or more sensible dress shopping. And then there are more general principles, such as standing your ground. You know, if you give an inch, they take a mile. People shouldn't be afraid to say no in the first place. I think that increasingly we're told to disregard our instincts and not to be outliers, but to be conformists, to listen to authorities and do what we're told. But often that voice in you that says no is the one that you should listen to.
That conformist idea, that's taking things personally, you know, because you feel that if you don't conform, then other people are going to take offense to that. So maybe you should. But if you don't take it personally, then you can observe. And that helps you stand your ground, I think, if you just don't take it personally. If you just watch, impartially watch what's going on. That's a hard thing to learn, but it's worth practicing.
I think it is one of the most important things to practice. So that's one of my big learnings, actually, in researching and writing For Your Mind. And it's the value of being the outlier. You know, somebody has to be. I think there's a lot about my creative work which has made me the outlier, but it's sat very uncomfortably with me. It's been really, really difficult. And it's through becoming consciously aware of the value of it that the feeling of vulnerability has lessened and the confidence has grown. I'm quite confident now I'm somebody who's much more likely to defend somebody in a social situation, you know, even if there's a feeling of physical danger or something, but to give the unpopular opinion, because actually it's helpful for the group. You know, we need Socrates gadflies. There can be a feeling of safety of being in the group, but if the group is all following in one direction, there isn't really any integrity in that. You can't rely on people that always follow the group, because they're always going to follow the group. But the person that speaks differently, the person who speaks up, they may say something you don't agree with, but they have shown they've got integrity and courage. And that lasts. There's a reliability to that. So if you do practice it, you'll find yourself in a new in-group of out-groupers, and they're more reliable people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but it does take practice.
You don't even have to know what's going on. You can also just observe, and eventually you'll see what's going on. And that might be enough of an outlier, because they don't even want anybody observing. They want everybody to conform. And so if they see somebody even watching, they're going to wonder what you're up to. But that is, at least, you're not sticking your head up that far. So it's worth doing that to start. And then as you become informed, you can start to speak too. So, yes.
Small steps. It's incremental. Yeah.
Small steps. And also, you know, a community. I imagine, like you said, a community of outliers. Jordan has an email thread of dissident cats. These are professors and a few journalists who aren't conforming, so he calls them a herd of dissident cats. That's what their little name is. It's quite cute.
Well, I think that's what happens. I feel like I've gained a new social circle. Not necessarily people I go for a beer with or something, but you know, they're now in my orbit since March 2020, because I put my head above the parapet quite early with that, and it was quite a scary place to be. You know, lots of doors
closed.
Did
you do that in March, right away?
Right at the beginning. I didn't believe in one day of lockdown, not one day. I thought it was profoundly immoral to tell people who were completely well, had no reason to believe they were infectious, that they couldn't see their loved ones go to school, work, earn a living to feed their family.
Who did you share that with right away?
Social media, friends and family. I mean, it was a bit like,
How were you?
well, yeah, it was a bit like Stepford Wives, like kind of looking around, who's not a robot, who's not been taken over by the alien invasion? Does anyone still think the same as me? And yeah, most people didn't. I definitely had friends contact me to say, you okay, hun? What's happened? Or try and talk me through it. But Laura, it's a pandemic. And I'd say, but there's data from Diamond Princess. And it just, I just had to kind of accept that we'd be agreeing to disagree for a while. I came off Facebook. I came off social media. I found it really unproductive. For one thing, I definitely got early shadow banned. My posts stopped reaching anybody. I was really angry. It felt really pointless even being there. I'd been effectively silenced. This mantra of freedom of speech, not freedom of reach, I think is pretty evil, actually. If you can speak but no one can hear you, you might as well be in a padded cell. I had fallings out, actually, with people who were close to me who thought that I was being socially irresponsible by not following certain mandates. But actually, I felt it was socially responsible to stand up for what I believed was true. And, I never wore a mask, for instance, which was a bit difficult.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I wore a mask when I needed to. And I probably gave people space on the sidewalk just because they seemed so scared that I thought I ought to just give them some space because they seemed so frightened. But I can remember New Year's 2020. We went for a party over at our friend's place because we had friends that we could go to each other's houses. And I was wearing thigh highs that had a deck of cards printed on them. And I thought, somebody's going to know I'm going to a party. Someone's going to see me because my socks say party. So I thought that was pretty funny that I was being a little bit, worried and looking around because someone was going to recognize my outlier behavior.
Well, it was a scary time, wasn't it? That you would think that maybe one of your neighbours, someone who lives in your area, might see you wearing the wrong socks and think you're a dissident and report you to the police. Right. This was a depressing time to live through.
How weird. We'd go over, my son lived at the end of the street, so we went to dinner at his house. And they came to ours like every second day because we had nobody else. But when my husband was around, he'd go over there and he'd close all the blinds. And we were like, never mind. But I guess he was a little more plugged into the controversy. And so he was like looking, seeing if anybody's looking. We were kind of just ignoring if anybody was looking. But when he was around, it was more apparent that there was something going on that we should pay attention to.
I remember feeling that. I remember saying to my children, you need to follow the rules as much as you can, but most importantly, you have to be seen to follow the rules because people are going to go mad. They're going to go absolutely mad. They'll turn on you if they think you're breaking the rules. And just in my little area where I live, there were neighbours calling the police about things.
When my kids were in grade 4 and 5, so now they're 30 years old, so it was a while ago, I can remember having days at school that we didn't think were necessary, like theme days where all your teachers aren't going to be there. We're just going to have a whole bunch of gay teachers come in and teach you for today. And Jordan said to the kids, this doesn't seem like a necessary activity. If you don't want to go, you don't have to. But you have to know that there will be consequences, and you're going to have to pay the consequences. So he always told them they had choices. They had a choice. They could go or not go, but they also had to be responsible for their choices. So they didn't go, usually. So they learned young not to go, which was good. And my daughter, she left Canada pretty much at the get-go and moved to the States because the lockdowns were so extreme here. She moved to Florida. That's what she did. She moved to Florida.
Very sensible.
Yeah, very sensible. Yeah, she ran away as fast as she could, and she's never come back.
Well, Canada became, from my point of view, here in the UK, Canada became like a living dystopia, with the
Uh-huh.
crackdown on the truckers' protests.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Trudeau became cartoonishly frightening.
And he's doubling down now, even though he's in the last throes of his fiefdom, he's doubling down. He's got his fist up a lot. He's trying to make the message stick, whatever the message is. The
Well,
message is carbon tax. You have to go with it because we're giving you a rebate that we're paying for through our taxes. Makes absolutely no sense.
I think that the enactors of the policies would find it very difficult to admit wrongdoing, even if they can see it. So I don't think it's reasonable for anyone to suggest now that the British public weren't subjected to a marketing, communications and nudging campaign that was designed to frighten them, to make them compliant. It's in their own minutes, the Scientific Pandemic Influenza Group on Behaviour. It's been acknowledged by founders of the nudge units. I think it's really well understood now. But there was an interview with the head of the Behavioural Insights team, the head of the nudge unit, David Halpern, with the Telegraph newspaper. He never gave me an interview for A State of Fear, funnily enough, but he was asked about the use of fear, and even a couple of years later, he was defending it. He was saying that it's correct to use fear to make people compliant if they're not correctly calibrated. And I find that sort of concept very jarring because we don't normally talk about human brains as requiring calibration. That's something that would be reserved for little bits of machinery. We don't calibrate people, not if we think of them as people, perhaps only if we think of them as miscreant social units to be shuffled around a board. But total lack of apology, total lack of understanding of doing anything wrong. They did that without working in any kind of ethical framework. We're all subjected to this terrible Ash or Zimbardo or type experiment without our consent, and nobody checked that we were okay at the end of it. There's no apology. There's no idea of wrongdoing. It's just, it's okay if people need calibrating. And I know I'm quite fixated on this fear thing, but just to finish on this, the idea was that it was to reach people who aren't compliant, but they were never going to be able to define who's not compliant and how and where those people are, or devise a discrete campaign to reach them. In fact, people who weren't compliant had understood very well what their risk was. They'd done quite good risk assessments. And what they did was subject the whole of the country to a really heavy-fisted campaign to frighten them. I don't know if you saw any of the ads we had here. They were off the scale, like, with horror film aesthetics, and really encouraging shaming and scapegoating and a huge emotional response, which is not something that's ever been advised before in public health.
Mm-hmm. I haven't watched TV since 1979. So my dad watched so much TV that when I left home, I wouldn't have a TV. And I quit reading the newspaper in about 1992. But I don't know. It just seemed like reading the newspaper just made me angry and sad. And I thought, well, I don't need that in my life. Let's get rid of that. But you can't avoid it anymore because it's just everywhere. It's on social. You just open your phone and there it is, in bright colors, and they dazzle you with it. They dazzle you with the news, whatever their message is.
Dazzle's a good word. Dazzle's a good word. I mean, I watch almost no linear TV anymore. And if I do watch it, I feel as though I'm some subject of a North Korean type regime, because the artificially confected storylines to convey social engineering purposes, or lurid weather maps, or just crazy ads with also weird social engineering in, makes it feel like it's an onslaught of propaganda. I just can't take it seriously. I can't watch TV. Newspapers have also become increasingly unpalatable, although, if you want to digest news in a cool, rational fashion, a newspaper is better than a phone and social media. But of course, the problem is that most of us around the world own a smartphone now. I think 83% of the global population has a smartphone, and we pick up our phone up to 80 times a day. And I mean, I think that there's very little to be said for smartphones. I still have one, but I am wondering whether I could get rid of it, because it feels like you've got the world at your fingertips.
I think you do.
You feel like
our
it.
world anyway. Our world.
Yeah, and there have been some incredible advantages for me in life being on social media. I wouldn't have published my first book because I used crowdfunding for that. I wouldn't have met some of the amazing people I've met, some of my dissident cats, my outgroupers. But I mean, study after study shows that smartphones have a negative effect on memory and on learning. They only have to be on the table next to us, like mine is now.
Especially for young women. Probably
Really?
young men as well, but young women, social media, because women look at each other. We look at each other and decide we're okay by looking at each other more than interrogating each other about what we think. We can, and I think that's because if we have a little baby, you got to look at everybody on the street to see if they're okay so that your baby's safe. So we've had we've had forever looking to see threat, to recognize threat. So we look at each other. And so on a smartphone, there's a lot of looking. There's a lot of looking. And those selfies that, they post, put them at the beck and call of other people. And it's got to be tricky when you're at a very young age and you're just finding out who you are and how you fit in and everything, to have that be your guide.
No, that's a really good point. I mean, there's a theory that I should have mentioned as well by now, by this stage, and I have to apologise to Patrick, I haven't mentioned him. I co-authored Free Your Mind with a psychologist called Patrick Fagan.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah, sorry, Patrick. He's a brilliant mind. One theory we put forward in the book is that actually, due to social media, we're all becoming our own propagandists now. I think selfies are a big part of it, but not just selfies, it's how we mediate an image of ourselves to the world through social media. I mean, for myself, I don't go on LinkedIn and talk about the time an editor's ignored me, or a book hasn't sold in the way I want. I don't go on and talk about any bad news or disappointments or boredom. I only go on and try and present a successful version of myself. And obviously that's up to me.
That's marketing.
Yeah, that's marketing. But I'm presenting a twisted view of myself. And I think it gets even worse when you put image into it. Like if I take a selfie that goes on Instagram, I'm not the vainest person in the world, but I am vain. I might take 5 selfies and pick the best one and put a filter on it. So we're constantly mediating our image. I mean, if you think back in the past, this is nothing new. Art has always flattered human beings. We've always made the best of ourselves. But let's say you were going to have a portrait painted. First of all, you'd have to be rich to do it. It would take many days, enormous skill. It wasn't something you could do easily. There weren't that many mirrors. Image was much less of an issue than it is now, when you could take 10 frames a second and apply filters that either smooth out your pores or give you cat's ears. You can do almost anything to your image. And I think that one danger of that is not only that we're messing up how people think of other people's lives. We're presenting this overly positive image, but we're accepting lies on a small level all the time. I think we're more tolerant of lying in general from everybody, from political leaders, from everybody, because we lie a little bit every day on social media and we accept it as just de facto from everybody. So I think that's a danger. It's a real medium for propaganda. And
I know you looked at Pornhub. Did you look at OnlyFans?
I haven't actually trawled through it as much as Pornhub. Yes.
Yeah. Because that's some place that you can. I imagine. I haven't really spent any time there, but I've delved a little bit into at least the problems with it. But I imagine you can really change yourself because it's not in real life. So you're not going to see any of these people supposedly in real life. You're only going to see them online. So you can become somebody you're not.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I wonder what that does. What does Patrick think that does to people?
I'm not sure about Patrick. I interviewed a
That'd be
cosmetic
like
surgeon.
porn in a way, though, isn't it? Because there you're getting however many women an hour, more than a man gets in his whole life. You can find in an hour pictures of, and so then you end up being this guy who's overindulged himself in this gold mine of images, and then your wife comes home and she says hello, and there she is, just one woman.
Wow.
Right?
Tammy,
Yeah.
it's not just a gold mine of images of women. Patrick and I did a back of the envelope calculation that the average 18-year-old boy has probably seen about 2,000 erect penises thanks to pornography. Now, when in history has the average 18-year-old boy, especially a straight one, seen another 2,000 erections? What is that doing to men? I mean, nobody ever asks us about the sex chapter in interviews, which is interesting because
I'm curious about it.
Yeah, I think it's the most thorny one, actually. I mean, it was Patrick's idea we should do it. I didn't think we should even include a chapter on sex because it's so big. I mean, how sex can be used in manipulation and propaganda and the dangers of porn. It's a whole book. Some of these chapters could all be, a whole book, but this one was big. It's probably the chapter that we co-authored the most closely because I felt that as a man and a woman, we were going to bring quite different things to it. One thing we're totally aligned on actually is the dangers of pornography. And it's one of those things I was expecting when the book came out that all the interviews would be like, well, Laura, are you some kind of prude? Do you hate sex? What's the problem with porn? Because in this sex positive world, it's almost like you're not allowed to criticize it. I mean, I think sex, for the record, is wonderful. It's profoundly pleasurable. It's in fact so pleasurable and powerful, we should maybe take it a little bit more seriously. I think that pornography has a lot of downsides. In fact, a lot of my work, I know, has come out of an attempt to counter the pernicious effects of pornography. I mean, my first book was photographing and interviewing 100 women about their breasts. And this came out of all the soft porn that I saw growing up. My dad had a big collection. It was everywhere in the world.
Yeah, my dad too. Playboy magazines.
We had that and some harder stuff, but it's not healthy to grow up that way. And we interviewed young people about the impact of pornography on them. Sure, this isn't some big quantitative study, but I think we have to take this into the rounds. I've interviewed a woman who explained how she had labiaplasty as a result of watching pornography. This is like self-image as a sick dog eating its own tail. So she's watching pornography and thinking her labia don't look right and having surgery. But then the porn star she's watching had labiaplasty, which she knows. So there's that. And then this cosmetic surgeon I interviewed, Dr. Esho, has coined the term Snapchat dysmorphia. Going back to what you were saying about selfies, he finds now that people go into his surgery not with a picture of Cindy Crawford or a movie star and saying, I want to look like her. They take in a picture of their selfie. And they say, I want to look like me, but with the filter. It's actually more achievable for the cosmetic surgeons. But again, there's something strange here. We've created an artificial version of ourselves and then we want to look like it. I asked if anyone's gone in yet wanting cat's ears, and he said not yet, but I swear it's only a matter of time. People are going to want to come out looking like animal versions. Pornography is obviously, it can be destructive to self-image for the viewer, but also for the viewer in relation to their partner.
And that how abortion comes and intersects with pornography. I was just thinking how it intersects with pornography. Because you're not going to be the woman of his dreams if you're pregnant. Right? If you're making money through Pornhub or OnlyFans, so you're going to put an end to anything like that might happen if you're after the money. And that's another thing we can talk about too, is money and how money has become so central to our society.
Hasn't money always been central? The acquisition of power
I don't know if it's always been, but it definitely has been in our, maybe since the Industrial Revolution or something. As soon as they could send things around at quite a speed and maybe a number and have multiples made of something, man, then money, then you could make money. And I think that's become so important that we've forgotten everything else.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't really thought about money that much. In fact, one of my great failings is I've not thought about money nearly enough in life, and I should be much richer than I am. But no, I haven't thought about money enough.
Well,
but
I don't know if you want to think about it that much, because it's a central low virtue, I guess. It's, you need to have enough money so that you can support yourself and your family and maybe do something useful for your society and stuff. But it's become much more than that. It's what can I own? What can I own, and how can I use this as a force? Because I'm more powerful with all this money. Yeah, money. It can be good, but you got to be careful.
It's going to be an ill-considered riposte to what you've just said, because I haven't really thought about the history of money and what it's done to people. But it does, I do think, in a sense, kind of plus ça change. I think probably since the Bronze Age, things have been about the same. I just read a book about medieval history, and when people didn't have money.
When was that? About, roughly.
Thousands of years ago, and I couldn't tell you exactly when. Don't ask me any probing questions about my ill-considered opinion. But certainly as soon as we settled and we were making things. But certainly, let's say, agricultural revolution. So once people were tied to land and to somebody more powerful for them, then they were taxed in terms of the number of chickens or eggs or grains they were growing, and they were tied possibly more powerfully than they are now with money and taxes. But I don't know. Can I come back to one point about pornography? Because I feel like if anybody's watching your podcast and I haven't convinced them yet of the dangers of pornography, I've got something else to say. So beyond the basic ideas about body image, it's the fact that pornography can literally change your sexual preferences to the extent of creating paraphilias. Now, researchers have known since the 1960s that paraphilias can be conditioned. And one of my favourite examples of a study is male rats being conditioned to fancy female rats with jackets on. So in the end, this poor little group of male rats only fancied female rats if they were clothed and not just in their naked fur. Also, you can condition men, men were conditioned to fancy women in kinky boots and then just the boots on their own. This is not difficult. So if you're watching a lot of pornography, you'll find your tastes may change. And I did, I've for a few different projects, I've quite intensively researched what's on Pornhub, and I did for Free Your Mind. And honestly, I was really shocked at what passes for normal, like top level stuff on pornography. On the homepage, I think something like 11 thumbnails were featuring incest, not actual consanguinity. No, it circumvents legality much better than that. It's sex with your stepmom or your stepsister, but it's supposed to be pushing that taboo. So that's just one thing. There was sex with machines, kind of sex machines, really weird anime cartoony sex, very trans-oriented stuff, like a body, and it becomes very confusing. You look at it and you think, what am I looking at? What is this doing to me? How do I feel about it? A body with breasts and a penis.
Well, you know what it does?
All kinds of things.
It says to you, that's possible. Think something like that's like, do you want to eat some insects? As soon as you start talking about eating insects, then you're actually having a conversation about it. Well, then you debate. Then you start debating whether it's a good idea or not. So then you're actually debating whether it's a good idea or not, that's something that you can discuss, that it isn't preposterous to even think about that. But no, we're going to debate it now. Well, then you can demand it of people. So
absolutely,
so that's very interesting what you're saying about Pornhub.
So that happens in pornography. I mean, I could give you, there's the insect example, there's the COVID vaccine mandate example. We were told in this country, no, we won't bring in vaccine passports. They just drop the idea so they can deny it and then make you debate it, and then they bring it in as a possibility. And you go in this cycle, and you see that all the time in politics and with policies. But yes, that is exactly what's happening on Pornhub. I didn't want to say it, but yeah,
interesting.
you see this body and you think, oh, it's not only possible, but I'm feeling some kind of arousal, because, you know, we're human
Right.
beings. You see something sexy happening and you feel some arousal, and then you see
Yeah.
some more of it, and then it gets harder. And before you know it, your sexual preferences have changed. What you see on Pornhub now would not have passed for normal sexual activity 10 years ago. Definitely not. Definitely not 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's one risk. And of course, then another thing is that it's correlation, not causation. But pornography is undeniably cited in, you know, in divorce cases. It's connected with the relationship breakdowns. I'd say to anybody who thinks pornography is not doing them any harm, well, okay, don't watch it for 3 months and let's see how you feel at the end of that. If you can give up for 3 months.
Right. Good idea. That goes along with anything, actually, that you, a go-to action that you're using. Just that, let's not do that for a bit and see what happens. What was I doing? Oh, I was playing, I was playing solitaire on my phone. You know, we'd be in the car and I'd be waiting to get out and play a game of solitaire. And then Lent was coming and somebody asked me, what are you giving up for Lent? And I thought, well, all I eat is meat and water. So it's not going to be meat because then I have nothing left. How about I give up solitaire on my phone? And it doesn't sound like much, but it's very interesting because it was just this little thing that I would do. I would win most of the time. So it's not even challenging. And I gave that up. And then I thought, let's see what I do. You know, I started to write more, started to read more. Just that little thing that I gave up.
And I think that's a big thing, giving up something on the smartphone. You know, there's something, I think, when you can pick up your smartphone and you can instantly feel a sort of a sense of relaxation. Your brain waves are changing already.
Right.
When we researched gambling for the book as well, because there's a lot that is done to kind of play on your senses. If you go into casinos and with gambling, you have to also be aware of your sensations. We make sense of the world through our senses. So that's one way you can be cognizant and resistant to manipulation, understand how your senses are used against you. But one thing I noticed now in casinos is that they have screens next to tables that are exactly in the proportions of smartphones, and the information looks like writing on smartphones. So, you know, it's kind of mimicking it's mimicking something to give you that feeling of relaxation and fun at a blackjack table. I mean, I definitely use social media too much. And it's a bit late for me to mention this, but I don't want anyone to think I'm some paragon of virtue. I've tried hard to free my mind, but of course it's the work of a lifetime. It's about being mindful about lots of different things. I'm on my phone way too much. I booked myself into a silent retreat in a convent for 2 days so that I could experience what that silence was like in general, take myself out of normal life, but also not to use my phone. And I was so nervous about what 2 days would be like, I changed it to 1 day.
No way.
Yes way. And it was really hard. I must do another one and do it for 2 days.
Yeah. What was 1 day like? I mean, you know, you did 1 day. What was 1 day like?
So I put that's in the book as a first person experience.
Oh, I don't remember that part.
I should say there's other first person experiences we had to take out because our publisher considered that the organisations would be too litigious if we wrote about what we experienced joining these cult-like organisations. I can't mention who they are, but the convent one was safe, and
that's good.
almost as soon as I arrived, I felt a lot of emotion come up. Actually,
interesting.
It was very calm. There was linoleum on the floor, wood-panelled walls, old-fashioned, slightly. Oh,
right. I remember
because my senses. Yeah, my senses really took it all in, and it felt a bit like comforting village hall. It felt like Church of England primary school. It felt like a grandma's house. There was a smell of floor soap and dried flowers. It felt safe and nice. And then I was shown to my single bedroom, which was plain, very clean. You could just smell the laundry powder, just a Bible by the bed, very nice, and a view, and the sun was beginning to set. And I felt this lump in my throat, and I thought, God, I knew I was going to cry, but not so quickly. And I did get my phone out briefly because I'm a mother, to let my children know I'd arrived and see how they were. But really what it was, at least 50% was I wanted to use my phone. Then I put my phone down. And I just cried. I had a really big cry. And then a nap. I was very tired. I had another cry. And then I went to the chapel. Didn't really like the chapel very much. I felt a bit sort of disconnected there. But then I went outside into nature. It was so odd to have no talking, no social media, no demands, no questions, that just in the space of 24 hours, I felt like I was floating in a little bubble. I cried a lot. I'm going to sound like I'm mad, potentially, to anyone listening, but we don't do this. We don't take ourselves out completely into that silence. And I realised that I've been fueled by so much single mother, stress, anxiety, work, busyness, constantly thinking, intellectually stretching myself, writing, running a house, that just 24 hours on my own, I dissolved. Just dissolved.
You're a single mother. It's no wonder. Yeah, that's a lot of responsibility, right? And a lot of decisions to make on your own. That's a lot. Like married couples, they get to at least share that, negotiate what the responsibilities are, and when they have a weird thought, they can kind of bounce it on, or they think, that kid's bugging me. Is that kid bugging you? No? Oh, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm in a bad mood. But when you don't have that other person, how do you do that? So you have to be very mindful. Yeah, that's quite a thing to do, I think.
That's well observed, I think, about the decision making. It is a lot of decisions. So I'm remarrying this year to the best man in the world. Thank you. To the best man in the world. Lucky me. Yeah. And, I really like him taking on decisions, and for me to have nothing to do with them, just nothing to do with it. Small thing. He's organising the wedding cake. I said, please, can you just not even ask me anything? Can you just do the wedding cake? Can I just not have to know about it at all? It's such a relief to be able to share decisions. That is a very unnatural situation, to be a single parent, have to make all the decisions. I think it's quite hard on your confidence because you're always checking yourself. There's no one to check in with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you have to, not only do you have to be compassionate, but you have to also be judgmental about what it is that you're doing. So yeah, that's hard. Because a woman, when she first has a baby, she's all compassion, right? Because baby's right about everything. And then when the baby gets a little older, then that's hard to stop doing that. Usually your husband's there to say, oh, this thing, you can bounce it on your knee. It's not that breakable, right? And the mother's like, oh, don't do that. So yeah, it's okay. She might cry, but she's enjoying herself.
Exactly. You need that balance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. How old are your kids now?
They're 17 and 19. So really grown up.
Oh, yeah.
It's a nice age.
I remember that age. Yeah, that's something. They can either be, they can be a lot of trouble, and also they can also be very, they can be a shoulder for you too. They can be both. They can be both real responsible and completely out there. Where you wonder, where did you go and what are you doing?
You're absolutely right. They can be both. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I have grandkids, 4 of them. Four grandkids. 1's 7, 4, 2, and a little baby.
Oh, that must be lovely. I really look forward to it in due course.
You can have more grandchildren at once than you can have kids, You can have 2 kids and then bang, you can have, 2 kids and then bang, and then you got 2 grandchildren, 4 grandchildren. It's like, wow.
Talking about kids, something you'd said, when you kindly asked me if I'd do this podcast interview with you, yes. You brought up some subjects for us to talk about that I wasn't quite expecting, having written a book called Free Your Mind.
That doesn't go with my book. And then I read books like, nope, that didn't go with the book at all.
I know, but I liked it. And I really did get thinking about one of them. And talking about kids reminded me, I think that the term you used in your email was, let's talk about brutal gender surgeries. Because I think that what's happening to kids now is going to be seen as off the wall, crazy, dangerous and evil as lobotomies.
It already looks that way to me, yeah.
And it's interesting because I did a kind of 180-degree view change on gender with my books, the Bare Reality books. So when I started, I did. So when I started photographing and interviewing women for Bare Reality about their breasts and how, what they thought of their body image, how their breasts had made them change how they see the world, how it made, how it affected how the world saw them. I included two males. One had all of the sex affirmation surgery and hormones, and the other one was male but taking hormones, estrogen, to kind of grow breasts. So they were both male but hadn't had surgery. And I included them because I was just really curious. If you're interviewing women about a body part that is uniquely defining, of their sexed experience of the world as female, it's kind of fascinating to interview men who believe that the acquisition of that body part, so far as they can, will make them female. And I was doing it very non-judgmentally. I mean, interestingly, some transgender activists hated the book because they thought I was saying that you've got to have breasts to be a woman. And I remember being very confused by that because I didn't really know much about transgender ideology and the extremist activists contained in that group at the time. And I'd say, well, no, I'm not saying you've got to have breasts to be a woman. I've got women in there who've had mastectomies. They're still women. I didn't know what they were talking about. And then there were radical feminists that emailed me to say, how dare you call it 100 women? It should be called 98 women and 2 men. I was saying, well, that's not a very catchy book title. That's just not how it works, But in the course of interviewing over 300 women and men, basically about their sexed experience of the world, the idea of gender just dissolved for me. It just became completely meaningless. It's just an idea. It's just in the brain. It's about personality. It's a fictitious idea of identity. It means nothing. What everything is about is your sexed experience of the world. And I became really concerned about the idea that especially young people were giving up these body parts. It's so uncomfortable. I feel like I can't inhabit the idea of my breasts, ovaries, uterus, and vagina being surgically removed. I can't think about it too much because it's too horrible. It's like thinking about the worst torture you never want to endure or a death you don't want to go through because it's the death of your own sexed experience of the world. When
you get older and you have, surgeries where you have to have a body part removed because it's cancerous or whatever, that's a very traumatic and scary. It's very scary, and it takes a lot of therapy afterwards to come to terms with it and all of that. So what they're doing is mind-blowing. First of all, that you're going to change something as fundamental as your sex organs, and how that's going to, and how you're going to come to terms with that. Wow, I don't even.
No, it's devastating, and I think that the fact that it's become not just normalized but medically endorsed is a very strange evil. It's hard to get our head around.
It's marketed like everything else. It's terrible.
It is, but I think there's something much deeper. There's another unconscious drive going on. So for Womanhood, I did manage to find one woman who'd had female genital mutilation who allowed me to interview her, although she wouldn't be photographed, which I completely understand because there's so much trauma and shame around it.
Did I see a film?
Yes, so in my film 100 Vaginas, she's in that. I have a really
good memory of that. So yeah, there's a film. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's a wonderful woman, very brave to do it. It's very hard for women to talk about this terrible, traumatic thing that's been done to them. But I think of FGM and gender surgery almost as two sides of the same coin. Now, I tell you what, Tammy, I wouldn't have had the confidence to say this a couple of years ago because it was considered so verboten, so transphobic to question gender affirmation surgery. But I think, we're beginning to be able to, or I'm beginning to be able to, maybe through the process of Free Your Mind, I've got a bit more confidence. But they're like two sides of the same coin, but FGM is widely considered a human rights abuse.
FGM, you have to tell me what that is.
Female genital mutilation.
Oh, yes,
so
right.
that's the practice where, there's a spectrum of it, but at the worst end, a woman's labia can be removed, her clitoris surgically removed, and then she'll be sewn up, so she just has a hole the size of a matchstick to menstruate and urinate through. That means that when she loses her virginity on her wedding night, because she certainly won't lose it before, she will be damaged and hurt. And then after she gives birth, she'll be sewn back up again. That's the extreme end of FGM. There's no good end of it either.
Yes, and they do that. They've been doing that for a very long time in different parts of the world. Female.
Yeah, it's mainly African, right? North African and African. Yeah, but FGM happens in this country. It's now, it's illegal in this country. And even failing to protect a girl who's at risk of it is illegal. So that's great. So we consider it a human rights abuse and it's illegal. And yet, we medically endorse a different type of genital mutilation, which I'd argue in a way is even worse, because what we do is we take some kind of mental condition. It could be something like autism or previous sexual trauma or a type of body dysmorphia from one cause or another, and we say, yes, you're in the wrong body. And then at the very worst end, once somebody's not a minor, at least in the UK, they could have that surgery. They could have their breasts and all their female reproductive organs removed, possibly even a phalloplasty. So they go through the same kind of genital mutilation, but they're also left unable to have a child. And for me, it's just not logical. You just have to look at it. There are two types of genital mutilation. One considered an evil thing to do to young girls and illegal in many countries. And the other, not just legal, medically endorsed, and you're considered some kind of bigot if you stand against it. I'd say even to an extent, male circumcision is another form of this. We remove a very delicate, sensitive part of a boy's anatomy that's there just naturally without the male infant's knowledge or consent, and it can be painful. Something like 100 male infants die every year in the United States from having male circumcision. Breast binding is another aspect. Girls will bind their breasts if they identify as boys. And we say that breast ironing in Africa is bad, but breast binding is good. So we're doing the same things in different cultures. One is bad, one is good. And there's no sense to that at all. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like there's some other kind of unconscious drive that leads human beings through one respect or another to undermine sexuality and fertility in children. There's something odd that goes on that allows it to happen under different guises in different societies, cultures, and religions. It's a kind of a collective madness.
Yeah, it is. And it does come down to the children and has come down to children over and over and over again. And you'd think by now we would stop before that, but we haven't. We've decided that that's an experiment we're willing to do again. And it's a real tragedy. It's a real tragedy. Yeah. Yeah. There's just there's so many reasons to be uncertain about puberty, and a lot of it has to do with puberty, but it's not just that. It's also mothers who have a dark triad personality. So they're all in it for themselves, thinking that they are virtue signaling that they're doing a good thing for their child, changing their gender. And look at me, how loving I am that I'm letting this, I'm allowing this to flourish in this manner. But really it's, complete manipulation. So there's that. That's just horrible to think about. And then there's also the girls and boys who get to puberty and the whole idea of changing into a man or a woman because maybe they experienced some trauma, sexual trauma when they were younger, and they feel that if they turn into this mature woman, that they're going to be attacked because they were attacked when they were young. And now it's for sure going to happen because now they're turning into a woman. So they're not going to have that happen. You just switch sex then, and that won't happen because there won't be any men come after me if I, so there's all these psychological things that people are dealing with, and we're not dealing with it psychologically. We're dealing with it surgically. Wow.
which just buries the
what?
psychological problem and means it's
Yeah.
just gonna come back and bite you even harder. But by then it will be too late to fix what's happened physically. You know, there's a connection here with pornography as well, which we were talking about before. I've interviewed a couple of male detransitioners. So these were boys who identified as girls, had surgery, and then regretted it. Because once a penis has been removed and you've had feminizing hormones, you can't undo that.
No.
And one told me very movingly about how, you know, really he thinks he was gay, quite an effeminate gay, but it would have been absolutely impossible to come out like that in his kind of northern rough town in England. And being exposed to pornography at a young age, it was quite violent. A lot of pornography is very violent now. And he found the men brutal in it, and he didn't identify with them. He identified with the woman. And that started, he pinpoints, that's when it started, that he was thinking about being a woman, because he identified with a woman, not the man in pornography.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of disconnect between people's experiences, their thoughts and experiences, and what their community, if they had a healthy community, what their healthy community would help them think about. And, you know, so we're not as closely, we have these large urban places now where nobody knows anybody else. You know, I live on a street where everybody has semi-detached houses, and we all have the same kind of porch on the front, and it's a one-way street, so the kids can play on the street, so then you get to know your neighbors. And we actually have an annual street party where all the neighbors on this only 2-block long street get together and play all day, and that's good, right? And still, that day is when you find out people have moved and there's new people and people have died and stuff. Like, you're not really in contact as, like, I mean, even when I was a little kid, of course, little kids know everybody, right? Little kids, they check out the whole neighborhood because they play hide and seek. So they know everywhere and what's going on in all the houses. I used to deliver newspapers, so I kind of knew, because I'd open people's doors and put the newspaper in. So I kind of knew what was going on. But adults, and especially now that women go to work and men go to work, so then there's nobody at home. So then we don't mix like we did. So then when you're uncomfortable, who are you going to talk to? You don't want to talk to your mommy or dad. Who are you going to talk to? You're supposed to talk to your teacher, but now the schools are, woke.
I think it's a very good point about community to combat this. So bringing it back cunningly to my book, Free Your Mind Again, there's 2 chapters about this. One is practice social media distancing, and the second is stand up for something. Because the thing about the ubiquity now of smartphones and social media is that instead of being in real life, having formative experiences together, we're increasingly atomized, especially in the city. And so we're having experiences that are in silos. There's no such thing as a neutral social media platform. They're highly personalized based on what we're doing online. And so people find themselves in, little echo chambers. It's one reason why there's such division now between men and women. You see that in political research. We're developing very different political ideologies. So if more young people were actually having formative experiences with each other, they'd be less liable to what's called rapid onset gender dysphoria, probably, which is caused by being on their phones and coming across trans ideology or experiencing pornography, etc. The second is stand up for something, because you talked about the mother and the dark triad personality. I do think that exists, but I think that there's a bigger problem, which is parents not having a strong moral compass and the ability to listen to their instincts. If I think back to making the film 100 Vaginas, it's one of the scariest things I've ever done professionally, because I had such a huge sense of responsibility to the women. And we did include trans and non-binary people in it. But a challenge was that the people on the filming team I hadn't realised this, but they were so into the ideology. They really believed in non-binary. I'd have people I was filming with call me up on pronouns and stuff, and I say, I'm not going to use they instead of she. So I think back to the people I knew then who I was working with. They weren't bad people. They didn't have dark triad personalities. They just got swept away with the ideas because they themselves weren't fixed enough in what their own ideas were. If you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. We see this over and over. We see these waves of social media emojis. There's like the next current thing just changes so fast. It's swapping out over and over. One week everyone's got the rainbow flag, then it's BLM, then it's a COVID mask, then it's the Ukraine flag. You just can't keep up. And some of that is the loss of the value of religion in society. People don't go to church and have that community on Sunday anymore. But it's the loss of real world activities. It could be Boy Scout clubs or the allotment, but we're living this kind of atomized life. And, one way that you self-individuate and you have a strong sense of values, one way you derive the meaning to do that is from your community.
Yeah. And there used to be a church in the center. The church was in the center, and that's no longer the case for a large percentage of the population. And it needs to happen again. Because I didn't want to go to church either. I went to church till I was 13. I went to Sunday school and I went to Sunday services in the Protestant church in Canada till I was 13. And then I started doing yoga because my aunt introduced me to yoga, and thank goodness, because I was going away from the church and it gave me something to do every day. So it was a good practice. It gave me something to do that was actually good for me. And it may have kept me away from my own faith for a little while longer than it might have, but maybe it didn't either. Anyway, it gave me a good practice of meditation and all of that. But yeah, we've lost our way from the church. And people say, do you believe in God? Well, but what do you mean by that? Do you practice your faith? Do you pray? Do you go to church? Because you go to church, you don't like the people there, or you don't like what they're singing, or you don't like the sermon or whatever, and so I'm not going. That's kind of what I used to think. I'm not going. But now I realize, no, what you go there for, you go there to practice going. every Sunday you go at that certain time. So that's when it happens. So that's just like having your coffee, that's when it happens, and that's what you're doing. So you go to church, that's when it happens, that's what you're doing. But then one day you need it. Like all those days you don't need it. All those years you don't need it. And you don't need the people in the church either, or the priest. But then one day you need it because your life falls apart, or one of your kids' lives falls apart. And then you go to church and it's there to hold you up out of the depths of the deep, dark hole that is underneath everything, and it never ends. It keeps you like on a swaying bridge above all of that. And thank goodness for that. And we've forgotten what it's for. We think we know what it's for, but it's a practice. Faith is a practice. I've realized. That's why I pray the rosary. We were going to talk about that a little bit. I pray the rosary every day. And it's a practice, right? It's a practice. So I do it every day in the same place, if I'm at home in the same place. And my husband doesn't bother me. He knows what I'm doing. So he doesn't come there with a question or with a phone call or with something he wants to talk about. He looks, oh, she's not done yet, and just walks away because he knows what I'm doing. Well, that's good. So then I have that little place where I can do whatever I'm doing with God. And most days I don't really need it. But some days I need it. And then that practice is there. And I don't even know I need it till I sit down. And then I think, oh yeah, I've got to pray for this person, or this is happening in the world, and I have to pray about it. And to do that, just to give that little bit of time, seems to me to help me feel like I'm present with the world and attached to it somehow, which kind of takes me back to community. Yeah. So I like it. but I meditated, right? And I liked meditating. So now I just put the rosary in the place of the meditation. And so that's why I was able to do it, because I already had this. So you have to find a good habit that you have, and then you can slot in another good habit on top of it. If you want to, if you've decided you're not in that habit anymore, isn't useful, you can slot another one, and then off you go. I think it works pretty well.
I think so. I mean, faith is important to me, but wherever you get it from, you need a set of guiding principles in life. Because if you don't have guiding principles, you're an empty vessel, and something will come along and fill you. You know, churches, communities may not have a church at the centre anymore, but then what they've got instead is climate change catastrophe, or transgender activism, or one of our, pick a mix, social medias. So you can't escape the need for something. There's a vacuum, and it will be filled with something.
Yeah, you're going to turn to something.
You will turn to something. Yeah. So if somebody's an atheist or agnostic listening to this, it's not that you have to go to church or that you have to pray, but you have to have a set of guiding principles. At least take a piece of pen and paper and work out for yourself what your principles are, because if you don't, somebody else will fill them up for you. And on the meditation, this is it's a bit tangential to what you're saying about faith, but even 15 minutes of mindfulness meditation every day reduces your susceptibility to your own cognitive biases. Strange how that works, but having that time for yourself, mindfully meditating, will actually mean you're less likely to be manipulated.
Yeah, because you're aware. I practiced a little bit of Sam Harris's meditation app, and I was walking out in the forest on a road, and part of it was to be aware of your peripheral vision so that you're seeing the bigger picture, right? So you're talking about like see the bigger picture. So it was just an exercise on staying in that frame of mind while you walked for 10 minutes. Not zoning in on little details, but seeing the whole thing.
Literally, physically seeing, with your eyes, or
walking. Yeah, walking and just being aware that of the trees as they go back in the forest and everything, of the road, but also of the trees and everything else.
Right.
So just a different way of looking forward. And so so there's lots of mindfulness. There's lots of ways to do that, and it doesn't take very long. Like you said, 10 minutes. 10 minutes to write down what your values are, and to realize, to actually think about what's at the top. Mm. Is it your job, your kids, or is it climate?
Mm. And if you don't know, somebody else will tell you. And of course, in a period of instability, disrupt and reframe. We talk about this in the book. In these moments, these blips, when things go wrong, that's when you're vulnerable. Now, just taking yourself outside and having a look at the bigger picture literally does help you. It will make you less stressed. Your senses can be used against you, but you can also use them yourself to make yourself calmer and more resistant to manipulation. That view of the horizon, that bigger picture, has a soothing effect on your parasympathetic nervous system. It literally reduces anxiety. What we're doing now, having a podcast on a screen, this actually increases stress and hypervigilance because we've got this kind of tunnel vision. So physically, you can do that. But it goes from sort of the basics that every alcoholic and drug addict knows, which is halt, hunger, anger, loneliness, tiredness. You watch out for these blips because that's when you're more likely to fall off the wagon. Or, if you've just got divorced, you're more likely to sign up for a pyramid selling scheme. Or if you leave the bosom of your family and go to university, you're more likely to be captured by some crazy woke ideology. Or if you're society that's been told you're facing an existential virus and to all be locked down, that's like a huge disrupt and reframe. And, you saw behavioral scientists literally say that while we were at our weakest and our habits were most malleable, that was the time to get us to change our behavior for climate goals, to make us decarbonize our lifestyles. So you do have to be aware of that disrupt and reframe. So anything you do to keep yourself on an even keel makes you more psychologically resilient.
I went to Al-Anon during the pandemic. I started going to Al-Anon meetings, which is a 12-step program. I had just a friend who invited me to go, and I thought, well, I love you. I'll go with you if you want to go to me. I didn't know what it was about. I got there and realized, I think like these people think, and I should probably stay. So I stayed for 6. They tell you stay 6 times, and if it seems to be something you could learn from, then you stay longer. And I stayed longer and learned a lot. And it's a very good way to mature your attitudes and mature your outlook and mature your frame of mind as well as your aim in life. So that's not, and it's non-denominational. It does have, you do look to a higher power. You do give up your life for a higher power so that you know that there's something bigger than you that is guiding you. There's that. And it's a very smart program based in Carl Jung's work, right? So very smart underpinning to it. And I found it really helpful. And I built a community of women that I have become very close to. So again, there we go, another community story. But
yeah,
yes.
and the principles aren't just for alcoholics. This thing about halt. Don't go shopping. Don't go shopping when you're hungry. Don't go shopping when you're hungry. Don't make a decision when you're angry. It affects all of our lives every day. These things to be aware of those blips.
It has lots of little things, like you said, halt. That's what made me think of it, because that's where I learned to halt, was in Al-Anon. I thought, halt. Oh yeah, I remember that. And that is what I did during the pandemic. And I took art classes online. That's what I did. I took art classes online and went to Al-Anon. So.
This sounds nice. This sounds better than my lockdown, where I completely lost my shit and wrote a book about the government weaponizing fear. That was quite. That was like that was a dark tunnel to be in, but it was good. It was productive. I took what was happening.
I was still finding my direction. I hadn't started my podcast yet back then, right? I started my podcast when we went to go back on tour. And I thought, I need to be doing something meaningful. While we go on tour, what can I do when I'm not anywhere, when I'm everywhere? What can I do? And I thought, a podcast, that would be something. And then I could research the rosary. So I started doing interviews about the rosary, learning about it. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to research the divine feminine, I have to think more about the divine feminine. And then I thought, oh no, that's going to take me some dark places. So that kind of scared me. But then I decided that it was necessary. And that's how I started podcast, which was right at the end of the pandemic. So
I like
wrote
that.
a book and I started a podcast.
That's that really reminds me of my own practice, actually, because whenever I'm creatively exploring something, for me it always involves interviewing other people. It's the connection with other people, reaching into their minds. What do you know? How do you feel about this? I really learn that way. I really like that. I like that interconnectedness with people.
Yeah, I think I do too.
But you haven't picked a small subject, have you? The divine femininity to divine femininity learn about.
Huge subject. But I'd already picked it by the time I was on it, so that's the way that goes.
Or it picked you.
Or it picked me. It seems like the only thing that I'm really super interested in. So
I think these subjects pick us, actually. I do. Yeah. Because I look back and I think, how is it that I went from the things I thought I was going to be doing in March 2020, I had some very nice projects lined up, to then writing a book, which turned out to be a bestseller, about the government weaponizing fear. How did that happen? And actually, I feel that because I opened myself up to it, in a way, it was almost like, I won't want to say immolation, but I kind of gave myself to it. I thought this could really close every professional door for me. But society's going in a really bad direction. I don't like what's happening, what I understand about what the government's doing. I just have to do it, regardless of the consequences. That's it. And it was like a baptism of fire. But a lot of doors opened. I'm kind of amazed at some of the interviews I got access to and the people I met who helped me. And I think it's because I opened myself up to an idea which had chosen me. And that's how I think about all my best work. I feel that really, sure, I'm responsible, I'll take the credit, but it's a two-way thing. There's something else. You open up and you channel an idea. Jung said that people don't have ideas, ideas have people.
Yeah, right.
I think there's a lot of truth in that.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. That also reminds me of the story of Abraham, because he stays in his tent till he's 75. And then God tells him it's time to get out of his father's tent and go on an adventure. And then he starts his legacy, and it brings him, the gifts it brings him is he gets to understand himself better. He ends up going on an adventure, and the adventure turns into nations. So he widens his scope of influence as well. And so when you follow what grabs you, follow what grabs you, you can go places and enrich your life instead of mandating what you want to do, saying this is who I am and this is what I'm going to study. That's not a big vision, you know. And I don't have a big vision, but if I take the next right step, as Jung also said, the next right step, I get places I never thought I'd get. You know, you end up, and then you think, oh, wow, look where I am. This could be fun or trouble. Right? This could be fun or trouble.
And sometimes both. I like that. It's a good principle, the next right step.
Well, that's an artist. That's an artist, right?
Oh, yes. And I'm going to have to give a bit of praise to your husband here. I've read some of his books. I'm a big fan. And he said something which helped me a lot. It was about order, about the need for order. And I was finding myself feeling quite downbeat about myself reading this. Because I thought, I just don't think I'm ordered enough. Oh no, this is why I'm not enough of a success. And then he says, but not the creative. The creative is more experiential. And they have to do things and have a bit of chaos. I was like, whew, that's me. Yes, that's me. I'm the experiential one. You know, I can be somewhat ordered, but it's an effort. I like to let myself go into an experience. And that's how I think I learn more about my identity and I evolve and I do good work. It doesn't suit me to be too ordered.
Well, you've written books, so you've become pretty ordered.
It does take discipline to write a book, but I'm amazed at the amount of chaos that I bring to that discipline. You know, writers all go about it different ways. Some people are very organised, aren't they? They'll have a number of words they're going to write every day, and they do that every day for their lives. I'm a lot more bumpy.
And you can do it that way too?
You can do it that way too, yes.
Right, well, that's good to know. I'm just starting to do that, so I don't know if it'll be bumpy, probably. I imagine, but we'll see. Maybe I'll put it into this slot that I have my prayer time in and see if I can make it more orderly.
Maybe you can. Writing while praying. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You could channel your best work ever.
Yeah, right. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been fascinating.
We'll be in London sometime. Hopefully we can see one another at one of the next gatherings.
I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.